The rope snapped with a crack that echoed through Millhaven's dusty square. But it wasn't the sound of justice. It was the sound of salvation arriving 3 heartbeats too late. Kestrel Maddox caught Vivian's limp body as it fell. Her face, already blue beneath the wild tangle of auburn hair that had once caught sunlight like spun copper. The crowd that had gathered to watch her hang for the crime of loving a wanted man scattered like startled ravens when they saw him standing there. 6 feet of weathered leather and barely contained fury. "Cut her down," he whispered to the empty air, his calloused hands finding the pulse that should have been gone, but still fluttered like a trapped bird beneath her pale throat. 3 minutes, maybe 4. The doc had told him once that a man could survive that long without air. But Vivian wasn't built like the hardened men of the frontier. Mayor Caldwell stepped from behind the gallows, his brass badge catching the dying light. "Should have stayed away, Maddox. She made her choice when she chose you over this town's law." Kestrel's hand moved to his Colt faster than thought, but he didn't draw. Not yet. Not while Vivian's chest still fought for breath in his arms. What choice? Loving a man you've branded outlaw for stealing grain to feed starving families. The mayor's laugh was dry as desert wind. "Pretty words won't change what you are, boy. Bank robber, horse thief. And now you've cost this town its most treasured daughter." But Kestrel wasn't listening anymore. He was counting heartbeats, measuring the shallow rise and fall of Vivian's chest, calculating how many minutes he had before the rope's cruel work finished what the hangman started. Her eyelids fluttered, and for one impossible moment, green eyes found his face. "KS, ... double quotes, the word was barely a breath, more felt than heard. "Here, darling, I'm here." He lifted her against his chest, standing slowly as the last of the crowd melted away into doorways and shadows. Only Mayor Caldwell remained, his hand resting on his pistol grip. "You can't save her, son." Doc Morrison examined her before the hanging, said her heart's been failing for months. "All that worry over you, all that fear. The rope might have stopped her breathing, but it was loving you that's been killing her all along." The words hit harder than any bullet, but Kestrel had learned long ago that the cruelest truths were often the ones that mattered most. He looked down at Vivian's face, seeing now what he'd been too desperate to notice before: the hollow cheeks, the dark circles, the way her skin seemed paper-thin against sharp bones. "How long?" he asked. Doc said maybe a month. Maybe less? Caldwell's voice held something almost like pity. "She knew Maddox. She's known for weeks. Why do you think she finally agreed to marry young Patterson? Wanted to give her PA some peace." Before, Kestrel's world tilted. Patterson, the banker's son with soft hands and softer spine. Vivian had written him letters through the winter, each one more distant than the last, till finally they'd stopped coming altogether. The Patterson mansion sat like a white-painted cancer on Millhaven's main street, with its wraparound porch and gingerbread trim mocking the poverty that surrounded it. Kestrel kicked through the front door without knocking, Vivian still cradled in his arms, her breathing more labored with each passing minute. "Doctor." He bellowed into the ornate hallway. "Where's Morrison?" Footsteps thundered down the carpeted stairs, and Dr. Morrison appeared, black bag already in hand. Behind him came young Patterson himself, Quentin. Kestrel remembered now, his face pale as morning milk. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," Morrison breathed, gesturing toward the parlor. "Get her on the sofa. What happened?" "They hanged her," Kestrel said simply, laying Vivian down on cream-colored silk that would never be the same. "For loving me." Quentin stepped forward, his hands shaking. "I tried to stop them, begged my father to intervene, but the town council..." He met Kestrel's eyes, and something passed between them. Not friendship, but understanding. "I love her too, you know. I've since we were children. But she never looked at me the way she looked at you." Morrison worked quickly, his fingers probing. The dark marks around Vivian's throat. Crushed larynx, possible damage to the cervical vertebrae. But that's not what's killing her. He looked up, his eyes grave. "Show me her hands, Maddox." Kestrel lifted Vivian's right hand, and his heart nearly stopped. Her fingernails were blue-black, her fingertips swollen and discolored. The same signs he'd seen in his own mother. Years ago, before consumption finally claimed her? Heart failure, Morrison confirmed. Been progressing for months. The emotional strain, the worry, the sleepless nights waiting for word of you, it's been eating her alive from the inside. Can you save her? The question came from Quentin, but Kestrel felt it echo in his own chest. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, his stethoscope moving across Vivian's chest. Maybe there's a treatment experimental, dangerous. Dr. Holbrook up in Denver's been working with digitalis extract trying to strengthen failing hearts. But the journey alone, she won't survive the trip, Kestrel finished. Not as she is. Now, but there might be another way. Morrison straightened, his face thoughtful. Holbrook's got a traveling clinic. Makes rounds through the mining camps, brings his equipment with him. Last I heard, he was working the silver claims up near Prospect Gulch. Kestrel knew Prospect Gulch to days hard riding through mountain passes that would test a healthy man, let alone a woman whose heart was already failing. But it was closer than Denver, and it was hope. I'll take her, he said. No. Quentin's voice was steady, despite his pale face. You're wanted, remember? Every sheriff between here and Colorado Springs has your picture. You'd never make it past the first checkpoint. Then what do you suggest? Quentin looked down at Vivian, her chest rising and falling in a regular rhythm. We fake her death. Here, tonight. Give her something to slow her heart. Make her appear gone. I'll arrange for a private burial, except we don't actually bury her. We get her to a safe house. Let her recover enough strength for the journey. And then I take her to Dr. Holbrook as my wife. Quentin's voice broke slightly. In name only, of course. It's just long enough to get her the treatment she needs. The cemetery behind Millhaven's whitewashed church held 3 generations of pioneers. Their weathered headstones telling stories of lives cut short by disease, violence, and the unforgiving frontier. Now it would hold one more lie among all. Those buried truths. Kestrel knelt beside the freshly dug grave, his hat in his hands, playing the part of a grieving outlaw, paying his last respects. In the distance, Mayor Caldwell watched through field glasses, no doubt making sure the notorious Kestrel Maddox didn't try to desecrate Vivian, Hartwell's final resting place. But the pine coffin 6 feet down held only bags of flour and a few of Vivian's old dresses, sewn together to approximate a body's weight. The real Vivian lay hidden in the root cellar beneath Patterson's stable, her pulse slowed to almost nothing by Morrison's carefully measured dose of laudanum. You sure this'll work? Kestrel asked, without looking up. Morrison knelt beside him, ostensibly helping to arrange wildflowers on the grave. The drug will keep her heart rate low enough to fool most examinations, Morrison replied. But it's dangerous. It's too much, and we really will lose her. It's too little, and someone might notice. She's still breathing. How long? 12 hours? Maybe 18 if we're lucky? After that, her body will start fighting the laudanum, and she'll wake up whether we're ready or not. Kestrel placed a small bouquet of prairie roses on the grave markera, simple wooden, cross-bearing Vivian's name and the words beloved daughter, lost to love. The roses had been her favorite, and he'd ridden 20 miles to find them blooming wild in a hidden canyon. She deserves better than this, he said. She deserves to live, Morrison corrected. Everything else we can sort out later. Sound of approaching hoofbeats made both men look up. Quentin Patterson rode toward them on a black gelding, saddlebags bulging with supplies. He'd shaved his soft beard and traded his town clothes for traveling leathers, transforming himself from banker's son to frontier husband. The wagon's ready, he said, dismounting. Told everyone I'm taking my new bride to Denver for a honeymoon. Got marriage papers dated yesterday, before what happened. Kestrel stood slowly, his knees creaking from too many years in the saddle. You know what you're risking? If anyone finds out you helped fake her death, they'll hang you right alongside me, maybe. Quentin's young face was set with determination. But if we don't try, she dies anyway. At least this way she has a chance, and after, when she's well. Quentin was quiet for a moment, watching the sunset paint the mountains red and gold. That's up to her, isn't it? I love her enough to let her choose, even if she doesn't choose me. They walked back toward town in silence, Three men bound together by their love for a woman who might not live to see another dawn. Behind them, the wooden cross cast a long shadow across the disturbed earth, while underground, bags of flowers settled into the shape of permanent rest. As they reached the church, Father McKenna emerged from the vestry, his face drawn with exhaustion. "Hardest funeral I've ever performed," he said to Kestrel. "Burying a girl I baptized, confirmed, watched grow into a woman. All because she loved the wrong man. Was I the wrong man, Father?" McKenna studied Kestrel's face in the fading light. "I don't know, son, but I know she believed you were worth dying for. Let's just hope you're worth living for, too." The root cellar smelled of earth and preserved apples, its stone walls weeping moisture in the pre-dawn darkness. Kestrel climbed down the wooden ladder, a tin cup of willow bark tea in his hand, found Vivian exactly as they'd left her, pale as carved marble. Her breathing so shallow it barely stirred the blanket across her chest. "Time to wake up." "Darling," he whispered, kneeling beside the makeshift bed Morrison had arranged. They'd given her the strongest dose they dared, gambling that her body could process the laudanum before her heart gave out entirely. He lifted her head, careful, of the rope burns still raw around her throat, and dripped tea between her blue lips. The willow bark would help counteract the drug, but Morrison had warned him that waking up would be the most dangerous part. Her heart couldn't handle the shock of returning consciousness. ... Vivian's eyelids fluttered. She made a sound, like a kitten mewing. Her hand moved weakly, fingers searching for something to hold on to. "I'm here," Kestrel said, catching her hand in both of his. "You're safe. We're getting you help." Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused and confused. "Kes, I thought ... the rope ... Her voice was barely a whisper, damaged by the hanging. "That's behind us now. Quentin's got a wagon ready. We're taking you to a doctor who can fix your heart." Heart, she tried to sit up, but the effort left her gasping. "What's wrong with my heart?" Kestrel helped her lean against a wooden crate, his arms supporting her weight. She felt like bird bones in sorrow, so fragile he was afraid to hold her too tight. "Morrison says it's been failing. All the worry, all the fear it's been wearing you down." Tears traced silver paths down her cheeks. "I wanted to tell you. Wrote you letters but never sent them. Didn't want you to come back just to watch me die. That's why you agreed to marry Patterson." She nodded weakly. "Thought maybe if you heard I'd moved on, you'd stop running. Stop looking over your shoulder. Find some peace." Above them, floorboards creaked as someone moved through the stable. Quentin's voice drifted down, calm and reassuring as he spoke to his horse. But Kestrel heard the tension underneath. Dawn was coming, and with it, the risk that someone might discover their deception. "Can you travel?" Kestrel asked. "It's 2 days to Prospect Gulch, maybe 3 if we take it easy." "I can try." Vivian struggled to her feet, swaying like a reed in wind. "But Kes, what if? What if this doctor can't help me? What if we're just trading one grave for another?" He caught her as she stumbled, pulling her against his chest. Her heart hammered against his ribs like a caged bird, irregular and desperate. "Then at least we'll have tried. At least you won't die with a rope around your neck for the crime of loving me." "It was never a crime," she whispered. "It was the only honest thing I ever did." Footsteps on the ladder announced Quentin's arrival. He carried a carpet bag and a long coat, his face grim in the lamplight. Time to go. Morrison's created a distraction at the saloon, started a fight between 2 minors over a card game. Should keep everyone busy for an hour or so. Kestrel lifted Vivian in his arms, surprised again by how little she weighed. "You sure about this, Patterson? Once we leave, there's no going back. If anyone discovers what we've done, they'll discover it eventually anyway," Quentin replied, climbing back up the ladder. "Graves don't stay secret forever in a town this small. But by then, hopefully, it won't matter." They emerged into the stable's dim interior where a covered wagon waited with a team of sturdy horses. Quentin had thought of everything: blankets, food, water, even a rocking chair cushioned with pillows to ease the journey's rough spots. As they settled Vivian in the wagon bed, she caught Quentin's hand. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you doing this?" He looked down at her. This woman he'd loved hopelessly for years, and smiled. Because you deserve the chance to choose your own ending. The mountain trail to Prospect Gulch wound through pine forests and granite ledges, a ribbon of dust and hope carved from unforgiving stone. Quentin drove the wagon while Kestrel rode alongside on a borrowed horse. Both men watching Vivian for signs that the journey was killing her faster than staying still. She lay on her side in the wagon bed, her face turned toward the mountains, occasionally lifting her head to drink from a water flask or nibble at the hardtack Morrison had packed. Her color was better than it had been in the cellar, but her breathing remained labored, and every bump in the trail made her wince. "Me about him," she said during one of their rest stops. "It's Dr. Holbrook." Morrison had given them what information he could. Cornelius Holbrook, educated at Harvard, worked in the mining camps because conventional medicine hadn't been willing to listen to his theories about heart disease. He treated miners with damaged lungs, women worn down by frontier life, children born with hearts that couldn't keep proper rhythm. He saved people everyone else had given up on, Kestrel said, adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. Built himself a reputation as a miracle worker, though he'd probably tell you it's just science. Nobody else understands yet, and if he can't help me, then we'll find someone who can. Vivian smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Always the optimist. Always the fool, you mean. Same thing sometimes. They were making camp for the night when the riders appeared, 3 men on horseback, moving fast down the trail behind them. Kestrel's hand went to his gun, but Quentin was already stepping forward, his hands raised peacefully. "Evening, gentlemen." Quentin called, "Something we can help you with?" The lead rider wore a sheriff's badge and the kind of mustache that suggested he took himself very seriously. "Looking for a man named Kestrel Maddox. Word is he was seen in these parts." "Haven't seen anyone like that," Quentin replied smoothly. "Just me and my wife, heading to Denver for our honeymoon." The sheriff dismounted, his eyes scanning the camp. "Mind if we take a look around?" "Got reports of suspicious activity near Millhaven. Grave robbing. Maybe worse." Kestrel felt his world narrow to the space between heartbeats. If they discovered Vivian, if they realized who she was supposed to be, the game would be over before it started. But Quentin never wavered, walking confidently toward the wagon. "Of course, Sheriff, though I should warn you, my wife's been feeling poorly. Mountain air doesn't agree with her." The sheriff followed him to the wagon, where Vivian lay, with her eyes closed, breathing shallowly, with her hair hidden beneath a bonnet and her face gaunt from illness. She looked nothing like the vibrant woman who'd been hanged in Millhaven Square. "Ma'am," the sheriff said politely, "sorry to disturb you. Just need to ask if you've seen anything unusual on the trail." Vivian opened her eyes slowly, as if the effort exhausted her. "No, sir," she whispered. "Been sleeping mostly. Not feeling well." The sheriff studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Hope you feel better soon, ma'am." Marriage agrees with most folks, but sometimes the excitement of a wedding can wear a body down. "Yes, sir," she agreed faintly. "Sometimes it can." After the riders left, Kestrel sat beside the wagon, his hands shaking with delayed fear. "That was too close, but it worked," Quentin pointed out. They saw what they expected to see: a sick bride on her honeymoon, not a dead woman traveling to save her life. Vivian struggled to sit up, her face determined despite her weakness. "How much farther?" "Another day, maybe 2, Kestrel said. "Depends on how rough the trail gets. Then we keep going. I didn't survive a hanging just to die of fright on a mountain road." Dr. Cornelius Holbrook's traveling clinic occupied a collection of canvas tents and wooden structures in a clearing beside Prospect Gulch's main mine. The sound of his equipment, steam engines driving mechanical bellows, electrical generators powering strange glass instruments, created a constant hum that made the miners nervous and hopeful in equal measure. He was younger than Kestrel had expected, maybe 40, with prematurely gray hair and hands that moved like a pianist's across his array of medical instruments. When Quentin introduced Vivian as his wife suffering from heart troubles, Holbrook's pale eyes sharpened with professional interest. "How long have you been experiencing symptoms?" he asked, gesturing for them to help Vivian onto his examination. "Table months," she admitted. "Maybe longer. Started with just being tired all the time, then shortness of breath, then..." She touched her throat, where faint rope burns still showed. Holbrook noticed the marks but said nothing, pressing his stethoscope to her chest and listening intently. His face grew grave as he moved the instrument from point to point, occasionally, asking her to breathe deeply or hold her breath entirely. "Your heart's rhythm is severely compromised," he said finally. "The muscle itself is enlarged, working too hard to pump blood that isn't moving efficiently. Without treatment, I'd give you weeks, maybe a month. And with treatment?" Quentin asked. "That depends on several factors. How we respond to digitalis therapy, whether we can strengthen the muscle without overtaxing it, how much damage has already been done." Holbrook turned to a cabinet filled with glass bottles and began mixing a solution. "I'll be honest with you, this is experimental medicine. I've had successes, but I've had failures too." Kestrel stepped forward. "What kind of failures? The kind where patients don't wake up?" Holbrook said bluntly. "Digitalis is extracted from foxglove, which is highly poisonous in the wrong doses. Too little and it won't help. If it was someone you loved—" Holbrook was quiet for a moment, his hands still working with bottles and measuring spoons. "I'd remember that dying with dignity is still dying. And I'd ask myself whether the person I loved would rather take a fighting chance or wait for certainty." "Then we try," Vivian said simply. The treatment began that afternoon. Holbrook had converted one of his tents into a recovery ward with a proper bed and monitoring equipment that looked like something from a laboratory rather than a frontier medical practice. He started with small doses of the digitalis extract, watching Vivian's pulse and breathing with the intensity of a hawk watching mice. "The trick," he explained to Kestrel and Quentin, "is finding the narrow space between therapeutic and toxic. Too conservative, and we waste time she doesn't have. Too aggressive, and we kill her, trying to save her." For 3 days, Vivian drifted in and out of consciousness as her body fought to accept the treatment. Her pulse grew stronger, then weaker, then stronger again, following a pattern that seemed to make sense only to Holbrook. He adjusted dosages with mathematical precision, sometimes hourly, always watching, always calculating. On the 4th day, she opened her eyes and asked for water, in a voice that didn't sound like she was speaking through broken glass. "How do you feel?" Holbrook asked, checking her pulse. "Like I've been fighting a war," she said, "but like maybe I won." Holbrook smiled, the first time any of them had seen him show emotion. "Your heartbeat is stronger and more regular than it's been since you arrived. Not perfect, not yet, but definitely improved. Does that mean?" "It means you're going to live, Mrs. Patterson. The question now is what kind of life you want to live." 6 months later, Vivian stood in the doorway of a cabin overlooking a valley where wildflowers painted the meadows in shades of gold and purple. Her heart beat steady and strong in her chest, and her cheeks held the color that had been missing. For so long, Dr. Holbrook's treatment had worked better than anyone dared hope, giving her not just life, but the promise of years to come. The cabin belonged to her now legally purchased with money Quentin had provided as part of their arrangement. He'd kept his word about the marriage being in name only, and when she was strong enough to travel, he'd quietly arranged for an annulment on grounds that the union had never been consummated. The legal fiction that had saved her life dissolved. As easily as it had been created, Kestrel emerged from the barn, his arms full of split firewood, and she felt her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with medical complications. He'd shaved his beard and cut his hair, trading as outlaws. Appearance for that of a respectable rancher. The wanted posters still carried his name, but they described a different man, one who no longer existed. "Fire's getting low," he said, stacking wood beside the porch. "Nights are cooling off early this year. Winter's coming," she agreed. "You ready for it?" He straightened, meeting her eyes. "Depends. Are you asking if I'm ready to be snowed in with you for 3 months? Or if I'm ready to make this permanent?" She laughed, the sound bright and healthy. "Both, I suppose." Kestrel climbed the porch steps and took her hands in his. "I've been thinking about names." "Names? For when we make this official, can't very well marry you as Kestrel Maddox that. Man's still wanted for robbery and horse theft. But I was thinking maybe it's time for him to disappear entirely. What would you call yourself instead?" "I was thinking about Daniel. Daniel Hartwell, maybe." taking your family name instead of giving you mine. Vivian's eyes widened. My father would have liked that. He always said the Hartwell name should continue, even if he only had daughters. Then it settled. Kestrel pulled her closer, his forehead touching hers. Daniel Hartwell, rancher and reformed outlaw, formally requests the hand of Miss Vivian. Hartwell in marriage. Miss Hartwell accepts, she whispered, though she should warn you, she's not the same woman who used to wait for letters that never came. Good. I'm not the same man who was too proud to write them. From the valley below came the sound of approaching riders Quentin Patterson and Dr. Holbrook, taking one of their monthly visits to check on Vivian's progress. Quentin had become an unlikely friend, his genuine concern for Vivian's welfare, transcending any romantic disappointment. And Holbrook had become fascinated by her case, using her recovery to refine his treatments for other patients. Company's coming, Vivian observed. Let them come. We've got nothing to hide anymore. That evening, as they sat around the cabin's hearth, sharing stories and planning the future, Vivian caught Kestrel's hand and pressed it to her chest, where her heart beat strong and steady. Feel that? She asked. What am I supposed to be? Feeling life, she said simply. Real life, with all the time in the world to live it. Outside, snow began to fall, dusting the valley in white and promising a winter of peace, warmth, and the kind of happiness that could only be earned through surviving everything that tried to destroy it. The woman who had been hanged for loving? An outlaw was gone, buried as surely as if she'd never been rescued from that grave. In her place sat someone stronger, someone who had chosen love over safety, and found that sometimes the greatest risks led to the most extraordinary rewards. The marked grave in Millhaven Cemetery still bore her name, a monument to a love story that had ended in apparent tragedy. But here in this valley, where no one knew their history and no one cared about their past, the real story was just beginning, one that would last not just through the coming winter, but through all the seasons of the life they would build together. And every night as they lay in each other's arms, listening to the wind in the pines, Vivian would place her hand over her heart and feel the steady rhythm that Dr. Holbrook's miracle had given her, the rhythm of a woman who had died for love and been reborn into something even more precious, a life worth living.